Namam Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswata Deva Gauravani Prachadane Nirvashesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarane Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So this is a presentation of Upadeshamrita, or Nectar of Instruction, a work written by Rupa Goswami, who is famous as one of the main acharyas and writers, authors, following the instructions of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And his most famous work is Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, or Nectar of Devotion. Its sequel is Ujjvala Nilamani, which follows the format of Nectar Devotion but concerns itself only with Madhurya Rasa. So it's more detailed. But we have these are quite large works. Upadesh Amrita, on the other hand, is a very small work, and it's sometimes included in these anthologies of Rupa Goswami's different selection of verses or different phrases like astakams, etc. So it is a very short work, but it also contains the essence of instruction. So that is literally what the title means. Upadesh means instruction. Amrita means sweet or nectarian. So it's the essence, the sweet essence of instructions. If we look at the work in general, it is largely, you can say, pointed towards Raganuga Bhakti and then Prema with Radha and Krishna. That's the actual essence. The same can be said of Nectar Devotion or Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Again, ultimately is pointing towards Krishna Prema and particularly Madhurya Rasa. However, we find that the initial instructions are also relevant for beginners, those who are performing sadhana bhakti. And the same can also be said for the Nectar Devotion. If we look at the whole of the Nectar Devotion, which comes in 4 parts, 3 parts are all about prema and rasa. And the first part, which is called the Eastern section, has 4 chapters. And in Bhakti Shastri, this is the part that the devotees study. And most of the devotees don't even touch the rest of the Nectar of Devotion. They just take the first 4 chapters. And of those chapters, of course, the 1 chapter is general, 2nd is sadhana bhakti, 3rd is bhava, and 4th is prema. So within that, we do get a description of sadhana bhakti. So therefore, the devotees are quite interested in studying that particular section because it deals with the beginnings of devotional service. So the first part of Upadesh Amrita also deals with the beginning part of devotion. No. Okay, fine. So, the beginning verses we'll see are very relevant for sadhana bhakti. And that is why, most likely, Srila Prabhupada chose to translate this particular work, because it has verses very relevant for sadhana bhakti, even though we'll see that later verses, half of the verses are all going into Raganuga and Prema at the end. So, this work has these sections which are relevant for us. At the same time, it is quite distinct from Nectar Devotion. In Nectar Devotion, we have a description of sadhana bhakti, and there we have quite a few details about the different types of bhakti. There's a lot of information there. In this work, is quite general, actually. And the parts of sadhana bhakti that are mentioned are slightly different from the approach found in the Nectar of Devotion. Right. So we come to the first several texts, and that becomes quite apparent. The first verse is Vachavegam, Manasa Kroda Vegam, Jiva Vegam, Udaro Pasta Vegam, Etan Vegan Yo Vishaheta Dira, Sarvan Apimam, Pritavim Sasisyat. So this is a list of unfavorable elements, things which will disturb bhakti, and you have to control them. So he's given 6 different elements here. And if you follow these instructions properly and control these urges or vegas, then you're qualified to rule over the world or make disciples all over the world. In other words, these are very essential for progress in devotional service. We'll find in Nectar of Devotion, on the other hand, not so much attention is given to the negative aspects, the things we are to avoid. Of course, there are 10 elements from 11 to 20 among the 64 angas mentioned in Nectar Devotion, which deal with things you don't do. Don't make too many disciples, don't make big projects, don't study too much scriptures, don't be overcome by lamentation, things like that, don't make offenses. So we have 10 things like that. But we don't get too much detail, other than the fact you shouldn't be overcome by lamentation. But here we get a little bit more detail of the problems that can arise if we don't control our senses and our mind. So we have 6 items mentioned in this first verse. One is the urge to speak, which is vacho vegam. So words, in other words, how we speak. We have to control our speech. Then we have manasa vegam and kroda vegam, 2 items. So demands of the mind and the actions of anger, which we can say in another way would be desire in the mind or anger in the mind, because anger and desire are both parts of the mind. So manasa vegam refers to the desires, and the other is the kroda in the mind. So kama and kroda, in other words, we have to control those aspects of the mind. And then we have the urges of the tongue, jiva vegam. Of course, we can say the first one, vacho vegam, concerns the tongue also, but technically we're talking about the vocal aspect in vacho vegam and the taste aspect in jiva vegam, which are 2 distinct senses in analysis of the different senses. Then we have these 2 others, udara vegam and upasta vegam. Udara refers to the stomach, and upasta means the genitals. So the urge for sex life and the urge to fill up the belly. So here a distinction is made between the tongue aspect of eating and the filling up the belly aspect of eating. So these are the different urges that have to be controlled in order to be qualified as a devotee. We can analyze this as verbal elements, that is the words, vacha vegam, mental, manasa vegam, kroda vegam, and physical items, tongue, belly, and genital. Often we get reference to, words, mind, and body. So basically we can make that division. Or we can make another division. The mental aspect, desire and anger. The sensual, senses, tongue, eye, ear, nose, skin. And physical, voice, genital, belly, anus, hands and feet. Of course, we see the hands and feet and the anus aren't mentioned, but if we look at the 10 senses, we'll find those mentioned there. So we can think of the physical senses, senses which are connected to the bodily enjoyment, and then the other ones which may be connected with knowledge, like the ear and the eye, where which we get information about objects. So we get mental, sensual, and physical elements. We may wonder, of course, about the belly or udara. Usually we don't think of this as a sense. In the 10 senses, it's not included. But if we look closely in Bhagavatam, there's an analysis of the universal form, and there we actually do get the belly described as one of the senses. This is just one verse from the 2nd canto, 10th chapter. It talks about the universal form. When the universal form desired to take food and drink, his location of the abdomen, the sense organs in the form of the intestines and veins, the devatas, the rivers and oceans and their sense objects, fullness from food and fullness from liquids, which take shelter of the sense organs and their devatas, appeared. So all of these things manifest from the universal form. Included here is the abdomen or the stomach with the intestines, etc. And along with that, the devatas of those the particular organ. So there it is, a type of organ, sense organ. So, if we have the uncontrolled senses, we end up in a very negative state, not favorable for devotional service. And if we control the senses, this is very favorable for devotional service. We don't see this control of the senses included as an anga of bhakti in Nectar of Devotion, but it's obvious that we do have to control our senses. The only reference we'll find is don't be under the control of lamentation, etc. That's the only reference we'll find among the 64 angas of bhakti in Nectar Devotion. But here we'll find very specific things that we have to control. So even though Nectar Devotion doesn't mention them, here in Nectar of Instruction, we do have instructions on control of these different things. So therefore we shouldn't think of that we don't have to control the senses. We can think of Nectar Devotion's instruction to control or not fall under the influence of shoka or lamentation, etc., to include all of these things. So don't fall under the influence of lamentation, anger, greed, lust, etc., and all of these vegas. But it doesn't go into detail about it. So here we have more detail. And this is useful for the devotees. So, we don't have a detailed description of control of the senses as angas of bhakti, but they actually are angas of other yogas. So in karma yoga, definitely there is control of the senses, and certain activities are forbidden, and certain foods are forbidden, certain other activities are forbidden, certain activities are praised, and you worship devatas, etc., with the goal of material happiness. So sense control is an anga of karma yoga. Often, in order to attain certain material goals, you should worship a particular devata, and then you take vows or vratas, and those vratas will include lots of sense control. So this is a way of introducing sense control for people who actually try to enjoy their senses. So this is an anga, sense control is an anga of karma yoga. And in jnana yoga and in Ashtanga yoga, of course, sense control is very important. And when we look at the yama and niyama, the first two angas of Ashtanga yoga, we'll find that there's a great emphasis upon controlling the senses. So you can't lie, you can't cheat, you can't have illicit sex, you can't have so many things. So a lot of sense control emphasis in Ashtanga yoga. And similarly for jnana yoga, practice of vairagya, or renunciation of sense enjoyment, is part of anga of jnana. So within these three yogas, actually, we'll get this sense control as an anga. On the other hand, in bhakti, instead of emphasizing controlling your senses and don't become angry, etc., there's more of an emphasis on engaging the senses in serving Krishna. So therefore we have engage the voice in kirtan, engage the ear in shravana, hearing about the Lord, engage your hands in worshiping the Lord. So we get all sorts of engagement for the senses in connection with Krishna. So this is how the devotee controls the senses. That's the whole intention of nectar devotion. Instead of emphasizing control the senses and renounce all these material attractions, rather engage the senses in Krishna. So that's instead of taking the negative aspect of stopping the senses, it is engaging the senses for Krishna. And therefore we have 64 angas concentrating on engagement of the senses. So this is considered to be a more practical way of bringing control of the senses by engaging them. And by doing this, we get prema. If you just control the senses, ultimately you can get liberation, but not prema. If you do bhakti yoga, you also control the senses, you also get liberation, but the goal actually is prema. So this is a system that gives everything else, but also gives something extra, that is prema. So that is the goal of the devotee. So in Sharanagati or Sharanapati, surrender, there are two, let's say, activities of surrender which are mentioned. One is accepting what is favorable, and the other is rejecting what is unfavorable. So in those accepting what is favorable and rejecting it unfavorable, in the unfavorable aspects, rejecting that, then we can include all of these vegas, the 6 vegas mentioned, the urge for of the tongue, the urge of the belly, etc. And all these things which are unfavorable, so we have to reject them. So therefore, in that way, they're also included within bhakti. But the main emphasis again is the surrender to the Supreme Lord, and in pursuance of that, then we avoid certain things like these 6 vegas. So the emphasis is upon the bhakti aspect to get prema, and the rejecting the unfavorable elements is a secondary aspect of that to help us. And instead of just rejecting the unfavorable, we do the opposite and we accept favorable. So this is often the strategy in devotional service. Sometimes there is an emphasis on the negative aspects, so therefore we have avoid the 10 aparads to the holy name. So we say, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. So there is sometimes that rejecting of the unfavorable elements. But on the other hand, we do find our acharyas also say that not only we should understand the aparads, but we should do the opposite. So instead of sadhu ninda, criticizing the devotees, with the opposite, praise the devotees. So instead of doing sadhu ninda or criticizing devotees, if we have a goal of praising the devotees, then obviously we won't criticize devotees. So for each of these aparads, we can take the positive attitude, the opposite thing, and in this way we can avoid those aparads like that. So in the same way, rejecting the unfavorable things like anger, greed, etc., we can accept the favorable things and engage them in devotional service and get the proper result. Just to show the elements of surrender, we have the rejection of the unfavorable there among 6 elements there. So this will, by rejecting those, understanding what are the negative things, then we also do the positive things, and in this way we can properly surrender to the Lord. So in Bhakti Yoga, another way we can look at this is primary rules and secondary rules. This is an analysis given by Bhaktivinoda Thakur in Krishna Shikshamrita. Primary rules, or mukhya vidhi, are the angas of bhakti mentioned in Nectar devotion, such as shravanam, Kirtanam, Archanam, etc. 64 angas. The primary rules. Doing any of them, or all of them, or some of them, nicely, purely, produces prema. And they don't require things outside of bhakti to give that prema. We do have secondary rules called gonavidi. So these are the rules of varna and ashrama, which will include cleanliness of the body, concentration of the mind, avoiding all the things like lust, anger, greed, the 6 Vegas here, the Vegas mentioned, rules for interacting with family and society, and rules for your particular varna, your occupation. So these are all part of varnashram. So these could be used, but they are called secondary rules. They're only supporting, never become primary. So they don't in themselves produce prema. So simply being a Vaishya or a Kshatriya or Brahmana and following all those rules does not produce prema. Simply being cleaning your body up every day does not produce prema. So, nevertheless, because we do have a body as devotees, they are useful rules to follow. Rules of cleanliness, standards of cleanliness, etc. For the body, for the clothing, the rules of interaction with family members. We can take those from the varnashram system. We follow those rules, we can have healthy body, healthy relationships with family members and society, steady job by which we support our family, etc. So they're useful for us. But in themselves, they don't produce prema, so therefore they're not called primary rules of bhakti. They're always in a secondary position. But because we have a body, they're useful, so we can practice them. So those among those secondary rules, again, we'll find all of these things. Don't do this, don't do that, don't do that. Don't be under the control of anger and greed and tongue and genital and stomach, etc. Those you'll find in the secondary rules. So they are helpful to us, though in themselves, simply following them does not produce prema. But we use those along with the primary rules. If we follow all those secondary rules nicely, eventually we get to sattva gun, which is a good position because it leads to peace of mind. And if we get peace of mind, then that's also favorable for bhakti, devotional service. So that's, say, good. But we should never think that simply following these rules is going to produce bhakti. It doesn't do that. But sattva gun also favorable for bhakti because it is peaceful. And we have an understanding, I'm not the body, I'm the soul, and we become detached from all of these different things. So by naturally following all the rules of varnashram, we can get to a state where we can control these 6 items mentioned in this verse, such as the urge of the tongue, the urge of the belly, etc. So in sattva gun, it's natural to control them. So yes, by following the secondary rules, we can begin to control those 6 urges and other things as well. Okay, so I mentioned about manasavegam and krodhavegam. Both are actually aspects of the mind. The manasavegam is the desire to enjoy objects, and then we ultimately enjoy objects, and maybe we want to get the Svargaloka or enjoy in this lifetime and get yoga siddhis, or even desire for enjoyment would be vega of the mind. And then the other one is when our senses are not satisfied, we get anger. And the anger may be directed towards particular objects or persons, whatever. That's the obstruction to enjoyment. So as a result of the anger, that we may use harsh words, which is the first one, vachovegam. Use all wrong words, harsh words, critical words, etc. And of course, ultimately, we may do rash actions, such as violence, sinful activity, etc. So, both of these have to be avoided. And both stem from the mind. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna talks about Ichcha Dvesha, desire and repulsion, disgust, anger, etc. These are the two functions of the mind, and both of them lead to illusion in the material world, so they have to be avoided. I mentioned the senses. So we have two types of senses, Gyanendriya and Karmendriya. The Gyanendriya, of course, is a little more familiar to us. So we have the tongue for tasting, the eye for seeing, the ear for hearing, the nose for smelling, and the skin for touching. So these are 5 senses, and these, the second line, are called the sense objects. So the functions of the tongue is tasting different things, and the function of the eye is seeing different forms, etc. So these are called the Gyanendriya. They give us knowledge about objects in this world with their qualities. But we have 5 other senses, and a few others as well. So these are called the Karmendriya, action senses. So one of them is the voice, which was the first Vega, Vacha Vega. So the voice is a Karmendriya for speaking. And if we don't control it, of course, it leads to problems. So we may speak about impersonalism, about karma yoga, enjoyment, sinful enjoyment, violence, etc. So by not controlling that voice, we become inspired to put those words into action eventually, or encourage other people to act in that way. So in this way, it becomes very detrimental for us. The udara, or belly, is for eating, and it becomes detrimental for us by overeating. What does overeating do? Of course, one can get sick, one can get fat, one can get lazy. So not a good position to be in for a devotee, because it will have effects on the mind and consequently on how we do our devotional service. So therefore, the belly has to be controlled. The genitals, this is very, very strong urge and has to be controlled at all times. Otherwise, it will lead to breaking all the rules of ashrama. And we have brahmachari, grihastha, vanaprastha, sannyasi. 3 of the ashrams are, we could say, very restricted: brahmachari, vanaprastha, and sannyasa. No sex life at all. So very controlled. Grihastha ashram, which is the biggest ashram, yes, allowed, but again, controlled. So there's control throughout the whole varnashram system on activities of sex life, even for the grihastha, the married person. So there's rules for everyone, and if anyone of any ashram breaks those rules, then this becomes problematic, and the consciousness gets affected. They fall into greater sense gratification, and ultimately their mind becomes covered over. So another way of looking at this is that the Vegas, which are called urges, are pushes, something that pushes us. So we have the Vacho Vegam, or the Krodha Vegam, anger, or words. The force of words push us, and we engage in anger or desire or speaking too much or whatever. Ultimately, all this incites more and more attachment to the material world and objects in the material world. And if we look at the aparads, the 10th aparad is, in spite of knowing all the glories of the holy name, still we remain attached to our material enjoyment and I and mind conceptions. So getting stuck with these material conceptions of I and mine and becoming more and more attached is a result of letting these Vegas take control of our life. So we do have to avoid the Vegas, even for avoiding the 10th aparad. So, yeah. We mentioned previously about the Vegas, how we can divide them up into different groups like mental, sensual, and physical. In any case, however we divide them, they all have to be put under control. If we don't control them, then we may end up with this position of 10th aparad, and then we cannot advance in devotional service. Yeah? Okay. Any question there? Yeah.
You were talking about the primary activities and the secondary
Yeah.
activities.
Yeah.
So, could we say that the secondary activities assist us in executing the primary activities, like, for instance, cleanliness, wellness, and anger?
Yeah. So they're included among the rules, but they're put in a secondary position. So therefore, that means that they don't produce prema in themselves, but they will assist. Those rules that we follow will assist us assist the primary rules so that we can get the prema. But there's a clear difference. They're not angas of bhakti as such because they don't produce prema in themselves. But by following them, because we do have a body and we're living in society, they're helpful for us to keep a peaceful, healthy body, peaceful mind, etc., so that we can do the hearing, the chanting, the worship nicely. Yeah? So that's why they put it in the secondary position. But because we do have a body, we do have to follow some rules for maintaining the body. And because we live in society, we have to have rules for that. So the rules of varnashram are convenient for that. So then, to the extent that they're favorable, we follow.
You mentioned the 6 enemies of the mind, particularly like lust, anger, etc.
Yeah.
So, do they have a personified form?
Oh, the Vegas.
Yeah.
Not specifically mentioned, but of course for lust, ultimately, I guess we could put Cupid in there, Kamadev, personification of lust. Anger, of course, we're talking about Rudra, the Shiva, personification of anger. And then he has his 11 expansions, and one of them is in control of anger there also. So we say that one is, there as well.
So, say the Vegas are situated within the mind?
The what? The Vegas.
Yeah, situated within the mind and influencing, or they're like an external source influencing the mind?
Well, we could say they're offshoots of the mind. Of course, we should understand that mind itself is simply a material element, so it really can't do anything by itself. It has to be connected with the consciousness, which is in the jiva. And mind is simply a subtle element in the subtle body, actually. But it does produce memories and impressions and desire and hatred and all these things, manifested by the mind contacting the different gunas, particularly tamaguna and rajaguna, and then we get desire and anger coming out. So they're byproducts of the mind in contact with the different gunas, in combination with the consciousness of the jiva. But the only way the jiva can be overcome by them is because the jiva identifies with the subtle body and the gross body through ahankara. So that attachment to ahankara gives a lot of problems to the jiva.
So you mentioned particularly one in the mode of ignorance is under the influence of lust, greed, etc. But someone in the mode of goodness means you're free of that, or
Yeah.
you're still able to be affected. Or
Yeah. So a person in the mode of goodness, we could describe as being majoritarily, in the majority he's influenced by goodness, but he's not absolutely in the goodness, so it's periodically make a little ignorance or rajaguna in there also, but prominently sattva. So the nature of sattva described in Bhagavad Gita is, one, he is satisfied, which means he gets his satisfaction internally, not externally, and thus he's not so much attached to getting sense enjoyment. That's a good quality, so he can control the senses, mind, etc. quite nicely. The other quality is called prakash, which means revelation or knowledge. So the nature of sattva gun is that a person will begin to understand that he's not the body, he is Atma. That far, we get some spiritual knowledge manifesting through sattva guna. It doesn't go any further than that, but at least you can get to the level of jnana yoga and, impersonal Brahman. That far you can get through sattva guna. So it's kind of positive in one sense, because if you're aiming for, liberation, etc., then obviously you're not going to be too attached to material things, and then you'll practice vairagya, control of the senses in jnana yoga. Negative aspect, of course, you get too attached, and then you can't do bhakti, you can't get prema. So sattva-guna's got good and bad aspects. We get too attached to it, we may end up going into Brahman instead of getting to Krishna. Oh, yeah. So we have these different vegas, like vacho vega, for instance, or desire, or anger, and we have these. The mind develops desire for objects in terms of these vegas. So why do we have uncontrolled words, for instance? Because we do have some material attachment and it's getting frustrated, therefore we'll start criticizing people or criticizing things or condemning things or swearing at people or whatever. Yeah? Our mind will go out of control because we're frustrated with not getting something for our senses. So for all of these different vegas, it's similar. It goes out of control because we're not getting fully satisfied or whatever. We want more satisfaction. Some of them, of course, like the vacho vega or the krodha vega, are due to extreme frustration. The others, of course, are simply due to our vasanas or impressions from previous experience. We got some material enjoyment and we want more. Yeah? So therefore, this kama, this lust will develop, or desire of the tongue, or the stomach, or the genital, whatever. All these will develop because we got some little experience before. Or, through association, we got some hearing. Oh, this is very nice. So we become inspired by another materialist who's very inspired by that, and then we get the same idea. And then, due to that asatsanga or bad association, then we become inspired to pursue the same things and develop in that direction. We get a little experience, then we want more. So this way, we get more and more attached to those objects by the more experience we get of them. Yeah? We get a little, then we want a little more, we want a little more, and then we think this is happiness, which is, like I say, satisfaction of your material senses, which is unnatural, but we think it's good because Atma identifies with the body and the workings of the body and whatever neurons are in your brain saying this is happiness. We've got these little neurons firing saying this is enjoyment in your brain. So only because we identify with the body that this Atma makes this identity and says this is happiness. So, and the jiva itself cannot tolerate not having happiness. It's the nature of the jiva to be happy, but it's converted into happiness of the body. So therefore we try to get happiness through these objects, and if we get a little, then we want some more. It's natural to want more happiness. So then we get very attached as a result of that. But bhakti means not attachment to enjoyment for ourselves with our body, but attachment to the Supreme Lord. The Lord's attachment is completely opposite. So therefore that too much attachment to things in the material world becomes this offense. You're so attached that even we have a little knowledge about Krishna and I'm the eternal servant of Krishna, it doesn't make too much sense and we're not too much interested in that because we're so stuck with the illusion that I do have to get this material enjoyment. This is how I'm going to be happy. So maybe have a little faith in Krishna, but it's not enough to take us away from these material objects. So therefore a person who has a little faith with too much attachment cannot take the devotional service. So it is said the qualification for true faith and beginning bhakti is not too much material attachment. At the same time, Bhagavatam says that it's not demanding that you have to give up all material attachment before you start bhakti. So it tolerates some material attachment, but not too much. Too much, then we can't even practice the bhakti. We get too stuck into the material enjoyment. Example is given of the foolish boatman going up the river at nighttime, and he forgets to pull the anchor out. So he works all night, and he looks in the morning, he's in the same place. Why? Because the anchor's there. So the anchor is all these material attachments. And if we're too attached, then whatever we do, boat doesn't move.
So is that connected to Parabda and Parabda?
Parabda?
When you have to decide because of previous influence?
Yeah. Well, yeah, we do have the influence of previous activities and the experience. So because of a previous experience of I got some enjoyment from that particular object in the material world, that gets carried over into this lifetime, and I got a similar type of attachment. Or of course, with any of the Vegas, like a Vacho Vega or Kroda Vega or whatever, all these things are, they say, vasanas that carry over from previous lifetime. But unlike the actual prarabdha karmas, which are the circumstances produced by the karmas, that is, you get sick at a certain point in time, or you get married at a certain point, you die at a certain point, they're more difficult to remove, but these vasanas can be altered more easily. Yeah? So that can happen, particularly through the process of bhakti. But they try, they can do it with karma, jnana, and yoga, but it's a difficult process, a long process. Can be done, but it's a long process. Through the process of bhakti, both the prarabdha karmas and the vasanas get destroyed much more quickly. Okay, we'll do another verse then. So, text 2 continues in this vein with these negative things. We have these different vegas. And these verses more or less show the results of uncontrolled urges, the 6 uncontrolled urges. So we have atyahara, prayasischa, prajopo, niyamaguraha, jana sanguschalolium, shadbir bhaktir vinasyati. So these 6 things will destroy the bhakti. These are the result of uncontrolled vegas. Overeating, over-endeavor, over-talking, rejection of rules, bad association, unsteadiness. They will destroy our bhakti. So we can relate these items somewhat with the first 6 items. We've got 6 items here. We had 6 vegas. So we can kind of relate some of them, or many of them, to a particular vega. In any case, uncontrolled vegas, not vedas. So the vegas, uncontrolled senses, etc., will lead to these destructive elements mentioned here. Like that. Yeah. So we had manasa vega, which was desire. So then we over-endeavor for different things in the material world. We become completely absorbed in attaining a certain material goal. So that's the over-endeavor, which is mentioned here, prayas. We have anger mentioned in the Vegas, the Kroda Vega, by which we would reject rules. We have rules to follow mentioned in the scripture and instituted in the varnashram system by the kings, or the rules of bhakti. If we are angry, we don't get our desires fulfilled, we will begin to reject all these rules and say, well, what do I care about rules? I'll just go out and enjoy. So we reject rules out of anger. We have the tongue vega, which can produce unsteadiness and passion. We have the voice, uncontrolled voice, over-talking, talking too much, prajalpa. We have the belly, overeating, atyahara, that was the first item, and the genital association with women. So we got these different elements here, like janasangas association, prajalpa was over-talking, niyamagraha, rejecting rules, atyahara, too much eating, and prayasas, over-endeavor. So as a result of not controlling the Vegas, we end up with all these problems, which are very unfavorable for devotional service. So prayasa literally means endeavor, but obviously we have to endeavor in devotional service. We have to put effort into it. So prayasa here doesn't just mean endeavor, but the wrong endeavors or the wrong actions, to concentrate our efforts in one direction, which are completely wrong. And that is, because of strong material desires, we put all our efforts in that particular direction. On the more spiritual side, we can put all our endeavors into getting liberation through the process of jnana. We can undergo great austerities, etc., to control the senses in order to ultimately get some enjoyment in the material world. We do vratas, etc., to get enjoyment. We can just work for supporting the family, accruing properties and houses and money, etc., or gross objects. All of this is prayasa, over endeavor. So we do have to control this. This was manasavega. Not accepting rules, niyama agraha. So there are many rules in the varnashram system, and there are many rules in bhakti yoga. And for our benefit, we follow those rules. We follow the varnashramic rules which are favorable for us, and we definitely follow the rules of bhakti for controlling senses and engaging the senses. But if we get frustrated with material anger, then we will reject all these rules and do whatever we want. So we have things like you have to hear and chant and remember, worship the Lord. You get angry, so what's the use of all these activities? They don't give any material benefit. I won't do them. So therefore, Krodavega gives rise to such things as rejection of rules. Lolium means unsteadiness, which means we dedicate our life to the wrong goals, like liberation or sparga, material enjoyment within this life itself, instead of enjoyment. So we miss the real goal and we dedicate ourselves to other goals. It also indicates passion or uncontrolled senses. So, and we saw the Jiva Vega could represent not only the tongue, but all the uncontrolled senses. And if we get too much involved in all these things, absorbed in them, then we may commit the aparad of simply worshiping devatas instead of the Supreme Lord, because we want to get our material desires fulfilled instead of getting prema. Prajalpa, which literally means talking a lot, or talking about material things. But it can also be, let's say, engaged in by devotees when, or people practicing spiritual life, when they discuss scripture just to defeat others by their learning. So this is also considered to be wrong. Where the idea of discussing scripture is not to defeat others. It's to inspire everyone to do bhakti, not to defeat people. So we see also in one of the angas of bhakti, there is, in the second group of 10 items, too much study of scripture. Well, we have to study scripture. We have to study Bhagavad Gita. There's too much study of scripture is bad. So then our acharyas comment, yes, a scripture is good. Bhakti scripture is good. You study the wrong scriptures, that's bad. And if you study even bhakti scriptures, but only with the idea to defeat other people, that's also not proper. Or if you study scriptures to make a living, that's also bad. So we do have in India what is called the Bhagavat Saptaha, where the speaker speaks for 10 days on Bhagavatam, and it covers how many chapters most of the day? It's a customary thing to do. It's like a punya or whatever, so very popular with people to engage in these discussions and hear them. So the people train themselves up to discuss Bhagavatam, so they discuss first canto, second canto, the first day, and third canto, fourth. They get up to 10th canto, 11th. And so they tell many stories, etc. So they learn all this from somebody and memorize everything. Then they speak it, and that's how they live. That's their profession. They go around, people give donations, and that's how they support those families. So that's also considered to be bad. So to make a living out of discussing Bhagavatam or any other scripture, Bhakti scripture, is considered to be proper. So that's, in that sense, overstudy is considered to be bad. And of course, if we engage in these other types of study of karma yoga and karma kanda for material elevation, and we give lectures on that or talk about that, encourage other people, then that's also bad. And simply to uselessly gossip all day long about material subject matter is also bad. So all this arises from Vachovega, the urge to speak all sorts of subject matters. And of course, if it's uncontrolled, it can lead us into sadhuninda, the first namaparad, which is very serious. Atyahara, too much eating. It can mean two things. Ahara can mean eating, or it can also mean just accumulating too much material objects or wealth. So the desire to accumulate, or to, in terms of food or material objects, is considered to be bad. And obviously the eating part is connected with udara vega, the urge to fill up the belly. And jana sangha, association, literally association with people, but obvious this means the wrong people. Asat sangha, in other words. So this could be gyanis, karmis, materialists, association with women outside of marriage, etc. So all this is, especially the illicit sex activities related to upasta vega, the urge of the genital. So this has to be avoided also. So all of these result because of the uncontrolled vegas. So that covers the second verse. Any question there?
Right, sometimes you see the word prajalpa has got different meanings.
Mm-hmm.
I think it may be back when we talked about Shravani Charya writes about it as a form of argument.
Is?
A form of argument, I don't really understand the difference.
Oh, is it prajalpa? Is that, or jalpa?
Talks about jalpa and prajalpa.
Oh, I see. I'm not so familiar with that. I suppose, yes, there's different types of argument you can use, but in any case, I think it's not a positive type of argument. That argument by which we come to a proper siddhanta, that's the best type of argumentation, or vada. That's the real argument, or vada. Huh? The other ones are all considered to be useless. Huh? I think prajalpa is also one of the ecstasies in Radharani speaking to the bumblebee, but there is an ecstasy. So it's a positive result there.
Prabhupada's that what I think that sometimes you translate Niyama Adhana as also just following the rules without understanding the
Yeah. The nature of Sanskrit is we could divide the words up and then we get opposite meanings sometimes. Niyama graha, niyam agraha. So one is accepting the rules, one is not accepting the rules. So if we accept the rules, then we say, well, what's wrong with that? How can that be bad? But if we accept the rules literally without understanding the principle behind them, this also becomes a problem. So we follow all the rules and whatever, but we don't understand the purpose of the rules, then we may lose the goal completely also. So we do have to understand the purpose behind them. So for instance, a person can have a vow even in Krishna consciousness, okay, I chant 16 rounds and I read 1 hour a day and this and that. Well, they can do that every day. And then they say, well, this guarantees me I'm going to get prema. Not necessarily. You can do that, but if you don't have any devotion in it, and you're just doing it because somebody told you to do it, but you're not paying much attention when you're doing it, then you're not going to get prema also. So we do have to understand the very purpose of all these different rules that we have. The other way is too many rules. Some people like to follow rules. Certainly rules are beneficial for us, but then we get too many rules, then this also becomes detrimental. Fortunately, the rules for bhakti are not so complicated, but then if we go to the rules of varnashram, they are very complicated. So because people like to follow rules, sometimes they'll start getting into the varnashramic rules and try to follow all those rules so perfectly, like fasting this way or fasting that way and doing this and that, and staying up all night and doing these things. So yeah, you could get into a lot of rules this way, and it's maybe detrimental because by doing that we start losing the whole point of devotion. So we have to be careful of not following too many of the rules, especially if it gets into, varnashram and then becomes like smarta rules.
So the danger is that thinking that by following the rules I'm being successful in bhakti.
Yeah.
It's actually by pleasing Krishna we're being successful.
Yeah. So we have like the different angas of bhakti. We say those are the rules, 64 engagements in devotional service. But we can never forget the main definition of pure bhakti there, which is at the very beginning. That is to cultivate a relationship with Krishna favorably. That's the main, with no other desire. So that has to be behind all of those engagements. If we lose that and we just follow the angas, then it's not bhakti again. It looks like bhakti, but it isn't. So it's not just the external actions, it's also the internal intent behind that which makes it into pure bhakti. Okay, I can do one more, I guess. Okay, so we had two of the negative aspects, the Vegas and then the results of the Vegas, the urges. That was these different problems that result. The third text is positive. So we get different 6 items which give success in bhakti. So we have utsahan, nishchayad, daryat, tatyat karma, pravartanat, sangachagat, sato vritte, sadbir bhakti prasidyati. Bhakti is nourished by enthusiasm, conviction, gravity, following rules previously rejected, giving up bad association, and following proper conduct. Yeah. So, if we control the Vegas and thus prevent the things mentioned in verse 2, all those problems that result, then we also end up with some favorable elements if we can control the Vegas, like that. So we can relate them somewhat. We get 6 items, negative items, and 6 items which are positive items. So we had over endeavor resulting from too much desire, uncontrolled desire. So the opposite of that is actually to have great conviction in following the process of bhakti. So if we have firm conviction of that, this is, we can say, the opposite of uncontrolled mind full of material desires. So instead of fixing our mind on material things and letting go and enjoying them, we fix our mind on attaining the lotus feet of Krishna with great conviction. That is nishchaya. Anger was mentioned as a vega, which resulted in rejection of the rules. So this one says, follow the rules, karma pravartanat. We follow the activities performed by previous acharyas and written in the scriptures. So in other words, we follow the rules properly. The first item was jiva vega, the urge of the tongue. Oh no, that wasn't the first one. I think it was later on, which was too much taste, for material things. So therefore, we should follow the proper conduct. That's called sadvriti. We had vacho vegam, the urge of speaking too much or whatever, which resulted in prajalpa, over talking. And the opposite of that, of course, is gravity, controlled speaking, seriousness. We had udara vega, the urge of the belly, eating, overeating, etc. So instead of having such or overaccumulation, we should direct ourselves to enthusiasm or utsaha for devotional activities. And we had, of course, upasta vega, the urge of the genitals, which resulted in bad association with or unrestricted relationships outside of marriage. And the opposite of that, of course, is that we avoid the bad association, sangha tyaga. So in this way, if we follow these rules of avoiding the Vegas, and we emphasize the positive aspect, then we can actually advance in devotional service. So, utsaha means enthusiasm. There are two types of enthusiasm. One is the false enthusiasm, which may be present in a person who begins bhakti. So they have a type of false confidence and false enthusiasm or false pride in their identity as a devotee. Of course, it's nice to be a devotee, but we should also be realistic about our own position and not think that we're invincible and we're perfect at the beginning of devotional service. And so that's too much utsaha. That's a false utsaha. But on the other hand, here we have real utsaha. That is, you could say, an optimism about the performance of devotional service. We have great faith that performance of bhakti will lead to the highest attainment, that is prema. So we become very enthusiastic to follow it. And we're also indifferent to the results of jnana and karma and yoga. Nischaya means certainty, to practice with great faith and conviction that bhakti is the only path. We know that the qualification for bhakti is faith. And in Chaitanya Charitamrita, there, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also says that one should have faith means a great conviction that if you do bhakti, everything is attained. We don't need anything else. So now, great faith in the process of bhakti as being the most satisfying process. And in Nectar Devotion, Rupa Goswami defines that conviction. He says, in the beginning, you may have weak faith, unsteady faith, due to lack of proper knowledge and association. If you have a little bit of knowledge by association, you can come to a second stage, which is called madhyama, where at least you're steady. But you don't have thorough knowledge, so people can defeat you and whatever. But you don't waver in your convictions, at least. That's a good position. But then he also says the best position is uttama, a person who has deep knowledge of Scripture, and thus his conviction is very, very firm and deep. And it is so deep, and he has such knowledge that he can convince others. So he's considered to be the best in terms of faith and conviction. But he says it's based on knowledge. So if you have good knowledge, of course, also bhakti, but if we have a deep knowledge of the bhakti scriptures and we study them with devotion, then our conviction becomes much stronger. So to help the nishchaya, or that conviction, knowledge of scripture is also very important. Dharya means gravity. One should be very serious about his practice of devotional service, not consider it to be a secondary activity, but primary activity for attaining his goal. So he always takes the rules of sadhana very seriously, and thus he avoids all these material gossip and things like that. And karma pravartana, following the activities. So we have rules to follow called vidhi. We have things not to follow, not to do, or say prohibitions or nishad. So we have those vidhi and nishad in regular activities like varnashram and karma yoga. To some extent we follow those, which are favorable for bhakti. Then we have the rules of bhakti that we have to follow. And then we have things we should not follow, that is processes of jnana and karma and yoga, etc. That's again nishad. So we do have to follow certain rules in our performance of bhakti. It's not just do anything we want. Huh? And Sangha Tyaga, we reject the bad association. So what is bad association? Association with women illicitly, outside the rules, and proper rules of Varnashram. To associate with a person who is controlled by a woman. To associate with a person who is associating with them, women illicitly. To associate with non-devotees, people who are materialists or Mayavadis or atheists or pretenders. That's all asat. So if we avoid all that association, then we are safe. If we indulge in that association, it will lead to a lot of other problems. Our desires will increase, all these vegas will increase. And shadvriti. One meaning of shadvriti is, vritti means supporting the body. So we should support our body with as much as necessary, but according to proper rules. In other words, ethically. We don't support our body by unlawful means. So in other words, we follow the varnashramic rules. The different rules are given for different varnas and for different ashramas. So if we follow those rules properly, then that is favorable for devotional service. And this will lead to steadiness in our pursuance of bhakti and help us prevent lack of sense control, etc. Okay, that covers 3 verses, I think. Any question? Huh? Yeah.
You mentioned pretenders.
Yeah.
Associated with pretenders.
Yeah. Yeah. There are several types of pretenders. In Sanskrit, sometimes they're called dharma dvajis. They hold up the flag of dharma, but they're actually not following dharma properly. So they're pretending to follow dharma, but actually they're not real, followers of dharma. So in other words, they're deceitful people. So that's where, let's say, varnashram system in general. Then if we take this among devotees, we'll also find pretenders and devotees. In India, it's quite common. People will act like devotees and be very devotional and serve the devotees and bow to your feet and whatever and serve you in many ways. But then ultimately you find they run off with all the money and they were just thieves disguising themselves as a devotee. So that's a very, like a low type of example, where a person is actually a criminal, but actually they disguise themselves as a devotee because they get an opportunity to take something from you, whatever like that. On a more subtle level, of course, we'll find people who are not so explicitly thieves or criminals, but they do have other interests involved, but they will act like a devotee as long as they can take advantage. But when it doesn't suit them, of course, then they leave. But as long as they can take advantage and live a comfortable life, then they participate in bhakti or whatever. But actually their interest is not to attain prema or whatever, but they will act like that because at least they can live comfortably.
Sometimes it's like, take it till you make it. So, sometimes it's deceitful when you try to, behave in a way you shouldn't be behaving, even though you may not be internally very enthusiastic, but, you're trying to follow the principles of bhakti.
Yeah.
Is that considered to be a pretender? Sometimes you feel like you pretend, but you keep on going, right?
Oh. Well, the steadiness itself means that in spite of all obstacles, we continue the process, and we may not have the ultimate enthusiasm or the maximum devotion, but at least we continue as part of our vrata to do that as a devotee with the final goal in mind. So nothing wrong with that. Of course, at the same time, of course, if we too much, we make artificial standards for ourselves, this may also be difficulty, ultimately lead to a lot of difficulty. So we should set standards also, which we are capable of doing and not stretching our devotional limits too much so that it becomes so stressful for us that ultimately we end up becoming hostile or whatever. So we do have to set vows for ourselves which are realistic. Anything else? Oh, yeah.
You mentioned about the virtue of wisdom controlling the urge to speak and that table
Well, yeah, speaking, except we have to control speaking. Vachavega means the uncontrolled speaking, etc. So, and with all of the items of these things, so it may be very difficult to absolutely avoid or control, but the main thing in devotional service is not so much the emphasis on controlling everything and stopping everything, but rather engaging everything in devotional service. So therefore, the opposite of the Vachavega would be engaging your tongue and speaking about Krishna and praising devotees, etc., instead of criticizing everything or criticizing devotees, etc. So we may not be completely successful at that in our speech or whatever, but at least our attempt is there to engage ourselves in somehow trying to please the devotees of Krishna. We can't be perfect at it in the beginning, but at least we can make that attempt. So therefore, whatever is not perfect, of course, ultimately Krishna will see the good intentions, and then it will not be a problem for us. The main problem is when the intentions themselves are negative or whatever, that we do have material intentions behind our words and whatever, so then, that's going to lead to a lot of problems. So if our intentions are good, but we can't do perfectly fine, at least Krishna is going to accept the good intentions. Okay, fine. Hare Krishna.